This is the story of the son of 7 queens. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 7 queens, but no children. This was a great grief to him, especially when he remembered that on his death there would be no heir to inherit the kingdom. Now, it happened one day that a poor old fakir came to the king and said, "Your prayers are heard, your desire shall be accomplished, and one of your 7 queens shall bear a son." The king's delight at this promise knew no bounds, and he gave orders for appropriate festivities to be prepared against the coming event throughout the length and breadth of the land. Meanwhile, the 7 queens lived luxuriously in a splendid palace, attended by hundreds of female slaves, and fed to their heart's content on sweetmeats and confectionery. Now the king was very fond of hunting, and one day, before he started, the 7 queens sent him a message, saying, "May it please our dearest lord not to hunt towards the north today, for we have dreamed bad dreams, and fear lest evil should befall you." The king, to allay their anxiety, promised regard for their wishes and set out towards the south. But as luck would have it, although he hunted diligently, he found no game. Nor had he more success to the east or west, so that, being a keen sportsman and determined not to go home empty-handed, he forgot all about his promise and turned towards the north. Here also he was at first unsuccessful, but just as he made up his mind to give up for that day, a white hind with golden horns and silver hooves flashed past him into a thicket. So quickly did it pass that he scarcely saw it. Nevertheless, a burning desire to capture and possess the beautiful strange creature filled his breast. He instantly ordered his attendants to form a ring around the thicket and so encircle the hind. Then, gradually narrowing the circle, he pressed forward till he could distinctly see the white hind panting in the mist. Nearer and nearer he advanced, till just as he thought to lay hold of the beautiful strange creature, it gave one mighty bound, leaped over the king's head, and fled towards the mountains. Forgetful of all else, the king, setting spurs to his horse, followed at full speed. On and on he galloped, leaving his retinue far behind, keeping the white hind in view, never drawing bridle until finding himself in a narrow ravine with no outlet, he reined in his steed. Before him stood a miserable hovel, into which, being tired after his long, unsuccessful chase, he entered to ask for a drink of water. An old woman, seated in the hut at a spinning wheel, answered his request by calling to her daughter, and immediately from an inner room came a maiden so lovely and charming, so white-skinned and golden-haired, that the king was transfixed by astonishment at seeing so beautiful a sight in such a wretched hovel. She held the vessel of water to the king's lips, and as he drank, he looked into her eyes, and then it became clear to him that the girl was no other than the white hind with golden horns and silver feet he had chased so far. Her beauty bewitched him, so he fell on his knees, begging her to return with him as his bride. But she only laughed, saying 7 queens were quite enough even for a king to manage. However, when he would take no refusal, but implored her to have pity on him, promising her everything she could desire, she replied, "Give me the eyes of your 7 queens, and then perhaps I may believe you mean what you say." The king was so carried away by the glamour of the white hind's magical beauty that he went home at once, had the eyes of his 7 queens taken out, and after throwing the poor blind creatures into a noisome dungeon whence they could not escape, set off once more for the hovel in the ravine, bearing with him his horrible offering. But the white hind only laughed cruelly when she saw the 14 eyes, and threading them as a necklace, flung it around her mother's neck, saying, "Wear that, little mother, as a keepsake while I am away in the king's palace." Then she went back with the bewitched monarch as his bride, and he gave her the 7 queens rich clothes and jewels to wear, the 7 queens palace to live in, and the 7 queens slaves to wait upon her, so that she really had everything even a witch could desire. Now, very soon after the 7 wretched hapless queens had their eyes torn out and were cast into prison, a baby was born to the youngest of the queens. It was a handsome boy, but the other queens were very jealous that the youngest among them should be so fortunate. But though at first they disliked the handsome little boy, he soon proved so useful to them that ere long they all looked at him as their own son. Almost as soon as he could walk about, he began scraping at the mud wall of their dungeon, and in an incredibly short space of time had made a hole big enough for him to crawl through. Through this he disappeared, returning in an hour or so laden with sweetmeats, which he divided equally among the 7 blind queens. As he grew older, he enlarged the hole and slipped out 2 or 3 times every day to play with the little nobles in the town. No one knew who the tiny boy was, but everybody liked him, and he was so full of funny tricks and antics, so merry and bright, that he was sure to be rewarded by some girdle cakes, a handful of parched grain, or some sweetmeats. All these things he brought home to his 7 mothers, as he loved to call the 7 blind queens, who by his help lived on in their dungeon, when all the world thought they had starved to death ages before. At last, when he was quite a big lad, he one day took his bow and arrow and went out to seek for game. Coming by chance past the palace where the white hind lived in wicked splendor and magnificence, he saw some pigeons fluttering round the white marble turrets, and taking good aim, shot one dead. It came tumbling past the very window where the White Queen was sitting. She rose to see what was the matter and looked out. At the very first glance of the handsome young lad standing there, bow in hand, she knew by witchcraft that it was indeed the king's son. She nearly died of envy and spite, determining to destroy the lad without delay. Therefore, sending a servant to bring him to her presence, she asked him if he would sell her the pigeon he had just shot. "No," replied the sturdy lad, "the pigeon is for my 7 blind mothers, who live in the noisome dungeon, and who would die if I did not bring them food." "Oh, poor souls!" cried the cunning white witch. "Would you not like to bring them their eyes again?"
Give me the pigeon, my dear, and I faithfully promise to show you where to find them." Hearing this, the lad was delighted beyond measure, and gave up the pigeon at once. Whereupon the White Queen told him to seek her mother without delay, and ask for the eyes that she wore as a necklace. "She will not fail to give them," said the cruel queen, "if you show her this token on which I have written what I want done." So saying, she gave the lad a piece of broken potsherd with these words inscribed on it:
"Kill the bearer at once and sprinkle his blood like water."
Now, as the son of 7 queens could not read, he took the fatal message cheerfully and set off to find the White Queen's mother. While he was journeying, he passed through a town where every one of the inhabitants looked so sad that he could not help asking what was the matter. They told him it was because the king's only daughter refused to marry. Therefore, when her father died, there would be no heir to the throne. They greatly feared she must be out of her mind, for though every good-looking young man in the kingdom had been shown to her, she declared she would only marry one who was the son of 7 mothers, and who had ever heard of such a thing. The king, in despair, had ordered every man who entered the city gates to be led before the princess. So, much to the lad's impatience, he was dragged into the presence chamber. No sooner did the princess catch sight of him than she blushed, and turning to the king said, "Dear father, this is my choice." Never were such rejoicings as these few words produced. The inhabitants nearly went wild with joy, but the son of 7 queens said that he would not marry the princess unless they first let him recover his mother's eyes. When the beautiful bride heard this story, she asked to see the potsherd, for she was very learned and clever. Seeing the treacherous words, she said nothing, but taking another similar-shaped bit of potsherd, she wrote on it these words:
"Take care of this lad, giving him all he desires,"
and returned it to the son of 7 queens, who, none the wiser, set off on his quest. Ere long, he arrived at the hovel in the ravine, where the White Witch's mother, a hideous old creature, grumbled dreadfully on reading the message, especially when the lad asked for the necklace of eyes. Nevertheless, she took it off and gave it to him, saying,
"There are only 13 of them now, for I lost one last week."
The lad, however, was only too glad to get any at all, so he hurried home as fast as he could to his 7 mothers, and gave 2 eyes apiece to the 6 elder queens. But to the youngest one he gave 1, saying, "Dearest little mother, I will be your other eye always." After this, he set off to marry the princess, as he had promised. But when passing by the White Queen's palace, he saw some pigeons on the roof. Drawing his bow, he shot one, and it came fluttering past the window. The White Hind looked out, and lo, there was the son of the king, alive and well. She cried with hatred and disgust, but sending for the lad, asked him how he had returned so soon. And when she had heard how he had brought home the 13 eyes and given them to the 7 blind queens, she could hardly restrain her rage. Nevertheless, she pretended to be charmed with his success, and told him that if he would give her this pigeon also, she would reward him with the jogi's wonderful cow, whose milk flows all day long and makes a pond as big as a kingdom. The lad, nothing loath, gave her the pigeon, whereupon, as before, she bade him go and ask her mother for the cow, and gave him a potsherd, whereon was written,
Kill this lad without fail and sprinkle his blood like water.
But on the way, the son of 7 queens looked in on the princess, just to tell her how he had come to be delayed. And she, after reading the message on the potsherd, gave him another in its stead, so that when the lad reached the old hag's hut and asked her for the jogi's cow, she could not refuse, but told the boy how to find it, and bidding him of all things not to be afraid of the 18,000 demons who kept watch and ward over the treasure, told him to be off before she became too angry at her daughter's foolishness in thus giving away so many good things. Then the lad bravely did as he had been told. He journeyed on and on till he came to a milk-white pond guarded by the 18,000 demons. They were really frightful to behold, but plucking up courage, he whistled a tune as he walked through them, neither looking to the right nor to the left. By and by he came upon the jogi's cow, tall, white, and beautiful, while the jogi himself, who was the king of all the demons, sat milking her day and night, and the milk streamed from her udder, filling the milk-white tank. The jogi, seeing the lad, called out fiercely,
"What do you want here?"
The lad answered according to the old hag's bidding, "I want your skin, for King Indra is making a new kettle drum and says your skin is nice and tough." Upon this, the jogi began to shiver and shake, for no jinn or jogi dares disobey King Indra's command, and falling at the lad's feet cried,
"If you will spare me, I will give you anything I possess, even my beautiful white cow."
To this, the son of 7 queens, after a little pretended hesitation, agreed, saying that after all it would not be difficult to find nice tough skin like the jogi's elsewhere. So, driving the wonderful cow before him, he set off homeward. The 7 queens were delighted to possess so marvelous an animal, and though they toiled from morning till night making curds and whey, besides selling milk to the confectioners, they could not use half the cow given, and became richer and richer day by day. Seeing them so comfortably off, the son of 7 queens started with a light heart to marry the princess. But when passing the White Hind's palace, he could not resist sending a bolt at some pigeons that were cooing on the parapet. One fell dead just beneath the window where the White Queen was sitting. Looking out, she saw the lad hale and hearty, standing before her, and grew whiter than ever with rage and spite. She sent for him to ask him how he had returned so soon, and when she heard how kindly her mother had received him, she nearly had a fit. However, she dissembled her feelings as well as she could, and smiling sweetly, said she was glad to have been able to fulfill her promise, and that if he would give her this 3rd pigeon, she would do yet more for him than she had done before, by giving him the 1,000,000-fold rice, which ripens in one night. The lad was of course delighted at the very idea, and giving up the pigeon, set off on his quest, armed as before with a potsherd, on which was written,
Do not fail this time. Kill the lad and sprinkle his blood like water.
But when he looked in on his princess, just to prevent her becoming anxious about him, she asked to see the potsherd as usual, and substituted another, on which was written,
Yet again give this lad all he requires, for his blood shall be as your blood.
Now when the old hag saw this, and heard how the lad wanted the millionfold rice, which ripens in a single night, she fell into the most furious rage. But being terribly afraid of her daughter, she controlled herself, and bade the boy go and find the field, guarded by 18 millions of demons, warning him on no account to look back after having plucked the tallest spike of rice which grew in the center. So the son of 7 queens set off, and soon came to the field where, guarded by 18 millions of demons, the millionfold rice grew. He walked on, bravely, looking neither to the right nor left, till he reached the center and plucked the tallest ear. But as he turned homeward, 1,000 sweet voices rose behind him, crying in the tenderest accents. He looked back, and lo, there was nothing left of him but a heap of ashes. Now as time passed by and the lad did not return, the old hag grew uneasy, remembering the message,
His blood shall be as your blood.
so she set off to see what had happened. Soon she came to the heap of ashes, and knowing by her arts what it was, she took a little water, and kneading the ashes into a paste, formed it into the likeness of a man. Then, putting a drop of blood from her little finger into its mouth, she blew on it, and instantly the son of 7 queens started up as well as ever.
Don't you disobey orders again,
Grumbled the old hag.
or next time I'll leave you alone. Now be off before I repent of my kindness.
So the son of 7 queens returned joyfully to his 7 mothers, who, by the aid of the millionfold rice, soon became the richest people in the kingdom. Then they celebrated their son's marriage to the clever princess with all imaginable pomp. But the bride was so clever, she would not rest until she had made known her husband to his father, and punished the wicked white witch. So she made her husband build a palace exactly like the one in which the 7 queens had lived, and in which the white witch now dwelt in splendor. Then, when all was prepared, she bade her husband give a grand feast to the king. Now the king had heard much of the mysterious son of 7 queens, and his marvelous wealth, so he gladly accepted the invitation. But what was his astonishment when on entering the palace he found it was a facsimile of his own in every particular. And when his host, richly attired, led him straight to the private hall, where on royal thrones sat the 7 queens, dressed as he had last seen them, he was speechless with surprise, until the princess, coming forward, threw herself at his feet and told him the whole story. The king awoke from his enchantment, and his anger rose against the wicked white hind who had bewitched him for so long, until he could not contain himself. So she was put to death, and her grave ploughed over. And after that, the 7 queens returned to their own splendid palace, and everybody lived happily ever after. The end.